1995 to 2014, which is the most baseline that is used by or recommended by WMO, and also being used in CMAP data generation, right? And then similar, if you want for Botswana to interrogate a specific region, you are also able to disaggregate that for that, and also at a sub-regional level. And then it gives you the different value chains and their respective climate hazards. So, for example, here you have a legend. It shows you the hazard. So, for example, wet alone, dry alone. So, wet alone meaning flooding, dry alone meaning droughts, and then heat alone meaning heat stress. And then you can combine. So, how if you look at combined effects of hazards, then what does that mean for your value chain? And then it also looks at if you scroll down, it also looks at the adaptive capacity. So looking at poverty rate, education attainment, and female empowerment. So this is kind of one of the notebooks that we have within the adaptation atlas. And then the other one is if you want to kind of look at different solutions that can be implemented in the agricultural sector, then there is a notebook for that. So, for example, if you apply inorganic fertilizer, then what will be the benefit of that? And this is mainly coming from published scientific work. And then looking at the different value chains. So, for example, if you're interested in maize, cotton, cowpeas, wheat, yam, you are able to also select the value chain you are interested in. And then there is that aspect of gender also. If you want to analyze women exposure to climate hazards, then you're also able to do that. So if you want to bring in that gender component in there, you're also able to do that. So if you click there, it will take you to the respective notebook where we've given you the description of what the notebook is doing, right, and the different aspect of the cell. Okay, so it's a very useful tool to use in all these different spheres. And then if you are interested in the livestock sector, there's also a tab or a notebook that is mainly focusing on prioritizing livestock investment, right? And then you can also estimate economic return on investment. For example, if you're asked for each $100 that the funder is putting in the investment, what is the return on that investment, right? So you're also able to do that with this notebook. And then if you want to understand the impacts on the producers, you can also explore the different data sets. But our main one is this formulate a climate rationale for projects. And this is what this whole session is all about, right? So we are still updating that, right? So this is, I will show you the legacy one, and then I will also show you the updated version of it. Okay, so this is that updated version of the notebook. So we are still updating this. So this is still behind the scenes. What you are able to access when you click on the notebook, which is Formulate a Climate Rationale, then it will take you to this page, right? So it gives you a good overview of what the notebook is supposed to do. So in the notebook, you'll be able to assess recent changes in key climate indicators, right? You are also able to project these changes into the future. And then you are also able to explore the exposure of the different candidates. So you are also able to assess the exposure of different sectors, and this is mainly in the agricultural sector. For example, crops, livestock, and others. And then you're also able to generate adaptation solutions linked to specific hazards, right? So if you scroll down, then you will get kind of general demographic and economic factors. So when you're developing your proposal, then you say, let's say, looking at, for example, Botswana, right? So what's the population in Botswana, both urban and rural, the poverty rate, the GDP, right? And what contributes mostly to the GDP, and also some aspects of the land use. And as I have mentioned, then it also gives you a very summarized insights of that particular information. Okay. And then once you have that information, you can also move into now the key climate indicators. And this is where now we are trying to start building our climate rationale. For example, if you're looking at let's say rainfall patterns, right? So this is Botswana. If you want to kind of look at a country level, you are able to do that. But if you're also interested at sub-national level, right? So let's say central region. So if you select the central region and then you have your season there, you're also able to select the season that you're interested in. Are you interested? Remember in last week when I mentioned you need to think about first the temporal scale. So which time scale is key for you? Are you interested in annual averages or seasonal averages or monthly averages or daily averages, right? But then because you're going for climate financing and most climate financing is looking at the projected impacts, then seasonal to annual averages usually suffice. So you'll be able to select the um, climate variable. So far we have temperature, precipitation, and then we've also calculated other indices for specific. If you are working in the maize sector, so you are able to, you are able to, through this platform to generate information about heat stress on maize specifically, or generally looking at all the crops. And then we also calculated indices regarding to flooding. So this is the number of water logging days, right? Or the number of days of water stress, and this relates now to droughts, because this will inform you in the historical part of it how many days of water stress have been experienced, and then if you look into the future or project that into the future, then it shows you if the number of water stress days are increasing or decreasing, and that now will inform you on your impact assessment, right? So if we've experienced, let's say, 10 droughts over the past 33 decades, right? And then what was the impact for that? And then if you project that into the future, then you relate now that with the impact that will be felt into the future. And so in your proposal, then you say, if the interventions you're proposing are not implemented, then these are the impacts that are going to be felt by, let's say, 2030 or 2050. And so from here, you are able to get, now you can see, so you have Botswana, we've selected here, and region that you're interested in is central, right? So it will show you now specifically, this is mean temperature anomaly for the central region of Botswana, right? So it takes your data from 1995 to 2014. So as I have mentioned, we are trying to extend
Sikiza idaro
this
nika
time
hata
series
naidream.
based on available data. So looking at 1980 182 there using CHAPS data up to the current 2025, 2026 there, so that you're able to visualize how things have changed over, let's say, 4 decades, right? And specifically, if you want to give your background information of, let's say, looking at temperature, you can see, for example, 2003 and 2004 were very hot in terms of mean temperature, right? Because this is anomaly. So it shows you these years, temperature rose by about 0.8 degrees Celsius, right? So you can see that interannual variability from one year to another, right? So you can screenshot this. I'm sure there was a way to download. Yeah. So on this section, right? So you'll have kind of like a bar on your left of your screen, and there are 3 dots. So when you click on the 3 dots, you are able to download your image, right? And you can use this now to start building your rationale. But then if you are interested in doing your own analysis, you are also able to download the data as CSV file. So when you click on the download data, so it will download the time series as CSV file. And then you can also change to another parameter or climate variable and see how the conditions work, right? And then if you want to look at the mean rainfall averages, you can deselect. So you have the anomaly data. If you select that, it will plot you the anomaly data. But if you deselect that, it will show you the mean in terms of rainfall, right? So if you click, it will show you years where rainfall was high and years where rainfall was below average, right? So if you look here, it will show you, let's say, 2002 to 2003. We had a deficit of, a deficit of 145 meters of rain, right? Then what does that tell you, right? So 105 millimeters in terms of the agricultural sector, right? And similar to the previous section, you also have your quick insights, right? So it will show you, it will give you a summary of, for example, how the central region in Botswana has warmed over this period of time, right? And also the change in precipitation and the variability in that, right? So it gives you a very good summary that you can use in your rationale to build up your case. And then now that is looking at the recent changes, right? Historical and recent changes. And then what is of interest is now also looking into the future projections, right? So like for historical trends, the future projections for the same key variables are needed to contextualize the proposed adaptation and mitigation solutions. Okay, so the moment you've selected your country at the top, so it will auto-populate the same for the other parameters. So both for the recent and historical climate information, and also for the future projections. So here we had already, remember, we had already selected Botswana, the central region, so it automatically populated here. And then also for the season and the climate variable, right? And then in here, you are able to see, for example, temperature anomalies, right? So how temperatures are going to change from the near future, which is up to 2040, to mid-century, which is up to 2050, to end of the century, right? So based on the scenarios that you would have selected here. And mostly, for most of this work, we usually focus on the middle scenario, which is putting in mitigation measures, and then the business as usual, right? So the center and extreme, okay? So this is SSP 245 and SSP 855, and it will show you, it will give you how temperatures are changing. And this now you also build your case, right? So in here, same thing, you get your quick insights, right? So you have, for example, Botswana is projected to warm by 1.2 2 degrees by 2050, right? And each scenario, if you go back to here, right? So, and the current situation, we see that Botswana has warmed by 0.69. But then by 2050, if you go back here, it will almost double in terms of temperature rise, right? So this is a good place to start building your climate rationale. So you've developed your problem statement, right? And then in that
What?
problem statement, if you're looking into the agricultural sector, then you define your climate hazards, right? And then once you've understood which climate
Ili
hazards
wastani
are
yangu
critical in that
kudaina
sector,
slap.
then you now come to these tools to now build up your climate rationale. Okay, so it's a very good tool that you can leverage on if you don't have that technical capacity to download data, analyze, and do your reporting. So you can leverage on this. Select your key variable, generate the figures, and then put them on the on your climate rationale section. And then here, what we've done is now looking at, you remember the impact assessment part? Now this is where the impact assessment comes in, right? So looking at crops and livestock, commodities, and how they are exposed to climate hazards, right? So this section allows exploring a variety of climate hazards variables that enable a deeper understanding of the potential implications of climate change for crops and livestock. So we still have our country, Botswana, region is central, and then we can select different hazards. So are we looking, so if you've identified, let's say, drought as your key hazard, then you select dry alone. So this will only focus on drought conditions for Botswana, for central region. And then you'll be able to see, for example, in the baseline or historical, so about $13 million value of production for cattle, right, is at risk, right? And then if you project that into the future, right, then it shows you the value of production, how that changes, right? Sometimes you'll see that, the value of production in terms of exposure reduces or increases, right? So I will try and showcase this in the updated platform and see how that is relatable to your case. And similar to the previous sections, you also get a quick insight of what key results from your selections. So, for example, exposure to dry alone hazard in Botswana affects about 15 crops and 3 livestock species, with a total value of production exposed being about 606.5 million US dollars, right? And then for livestock is about 15 million US dollars. And now that's where you build your case, right? You say, if you look at the baseline currently, your value of production for this particular sector is, let's say, 2 million. But then when you project that into the future, let's say 2030, 2040, 2050, then this value of production that is exposed is going to increase threefold, let's say 20 million US dollars. Then your solutions that you are proposing, right? Then you're proposing those solutions against what you've already observed, right? So you're building a case based on the information that is available for climate financing. And then, so this looks at climate change impacts on crop and livestock, water resources, and food security. So this shows you the different kind of like adaptation mechanisms that you want to put in place in terms of looking at either crop yield, crop suitability, or water resources. Right. Same thing. It also gives you a summary of whatever you have highlighted there, and then if you scroll down on the page, you'll also be able to see the methods and sources, data sources that we have used. So we have documented the whole process for this, and you'll be able to follow up the same. So both on the different data sets and sources that we have used, and also on the methods that we have used to calculate, for example, this crop and livestock value of production exposure. Okay, so this is one tool. And then the other tool is from the World Bank, which is the Climate Change Knowledge Portal, right? And this mainly provides
Bana, hii kitu ni
an
hatari.
understanding of the different
Ningekuwa nikikula
climate
west
indicators,
ya soko.
both historically and also projected into the future. Okay, and this can be done at different levels. So where my mouse is, you can do your analysis at country and subnational level. And for those in, let's say, watershed management and all that, you are also able to do your analysis at a watershed level. Okay, so bear in mind that all these, both Adaptation Atlas and the Climate Knowledge Portal, uses either regional or global datasets. Okay, so if you click on the country country, and then you'll get your landing page, right? So you see a map where, if you move your mouse across the map, then it will show you highlight the different countries. Okay, so let's say we use Nigeria as an example, right? So if you click on Nigeria, right, so it will take you to another page where now you are able to see your country overview, historical climate, future climate, right, and specific country-specific resources. And these country-specific resources, if you click, it's mainly looking at, for example, Nigeria climate risk country profile, right? And then also looking at long-term vision for Nigeria. Remember when I mentioned that we need to align our rationales with already existing frameworks, either national frameworks or international frameworks, right? So you need to build your case on that. So if you click on the country profile for Nigeria, for example, then you are also able to get additional resources that you can use to build your climate rationale. So you don't necessarily need to depend on doing this yourself. You can also rely on building your climate rationale based on literature information, as long as the information that you are collating from literature, it has to be up to date, right? So you cannot build your case, for example, right now we are using CMIP 6 data. So you cannot build your case using CMIP 3 or CMIP 5 data. So it has to be an updated information. Okay, so these resources are are readily available. It's just a matter of you knowing how to search on the web, get the necessary resources, and then build your climate rationale. So the first step for you is doing a proper literature review, understanding at a high level how the country is in terms of climate risks and climate change, and how different policy mechanisms are aligned to that, right? So in this document, you can find very good information. For example, Nigeria submitted its third national communication in 2020, its NDC to the UNFCCC in 2016, and they have updated that in 2021. So your solutions, right, that you're proposing also needs to be aligned to some of these initiatives that the governments are putting in place in terms of climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Okay, so this is some of the resources that you are able to access online to build your case. Okay, so in the country overview, it will show you the different climate classifications, right? So let's say most of the region is within the tropical climate, right? And then only the upper parts of Nigeria are within the climate horizon. So it depends on the area or region that you want to develop your solutions for, right? And most often, let's say funding coming from GCF or funding coming from Jeff or adaptation usually focus on specific solutions for specific areas. So they don't not necessarily covering the entire country, right? So they focus solutions and risks that are very key for specific areas, so not the entire country. Okay, so in this platform, you are able to also look at investigate the climatology of your area of interest, and in this case here, they have calculated using different data sets. So one is using from the Climate Research Institute University, and then the other one is coming from ERA5. So these are different data sources, right? And then you are also able to look at investigate other parameters like natural disasters. So let's try using this climatology from the climate research. So the good thing about the climate change knowledge portal, you are also able to generate spatial maps, of which we are trying to do that in our adaptation Atlas portal. Okay, so in here you are able to assess different climatic parameters. So on your left side of the screen, you can select your you've selected Nigeria, and then you're also able to select different sub-regions for Nigeria. And then on climate variable, so far they have temperature and precipitation. And then the climatology period you can select, so either 1901 to 1930, but that one wouldn't be very useful because the current situation is going to show you exactly how things have changed over the past 30 years. And that is relative to the situation we are in, right? So that's the first part. And then if you hover on the map, you're able to also see some summary of a particular area, right? And then if you click on the map, it will highlight the specific area you're interested in, and then it will also give you, right, analyze the data behind the scene and give you how, for example, temperature and precipitation evolves over the year, across the year. So from January to December. So all these are average monthly over the past 30, 40 years, so from 1991 to 2020. And you can see that in Bauchi in Nigeria, so rainfall peaks around July, August, September, right? So you only have like one rainy season, which starts around April, May there, and then ends around October, right? So now that one gives you a very good starting area. So building your climate rationale. So rainfall in this particular area is usually starts between May and ends in October. Temperature, for example, minimum temperature or maximum temperature is this much, right? And then once you have that context built, then if you look into the future, then you understand how things might change into the future. Okay, so this is one area, and then into the future projections, you see that they have already incorporated the CMEP6 data, so you can as well assess the mean projections and also assess the trends and variability into the future. So if you select, let's say, the mean projections, then this will tell you now how things are going to change in the future. And you can use this information to build now your climate rationale. So same thing, Nigeria, you have the subnational regions, and then on the climate variable, so in the projection data, what they've done is they've calculated several indices that are important for you to think about. For example, for temperature, there are, let's say, maximum of day maximum temperature, right? So, looking into the maximum temperature, then what will be the maximum of that into the future, right? And then you also have these other parameters. So for example, number of days with heat or with temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius. And these different indicators are very important in terms of if you are interested in the health sector, then which temperature, when it goes above that, then it relates to let's say heat stroke, for example, right? Or in the agricultural sector, then it relates to at that temperature, then which crop is going to be impacted the most. Okay, so that's on temperature. And then if you look at rainfall, so you have annual standard precipitation evaporative index. So this usually is an indicator of drought, right? And then you have average largest one-day precipitation. This will also be an indication of a flooding condition, and then maximum number of consecutive dry days, right? So if you look at, let's say, for example, for Biachi region, we've said that the season starts around April, May, and ends in October. But then in between, let's say you have 4 months or within the season, and then 4 months is around 120 days. But then in the 120 days, then you have, let's say, 20 days of maximum consecutive dry days. Then what does that mean for your agricultural sector, for example, or for your energy sector, right? So it's not only highlighting what is being experienced or what is going to be experienced, but then what is the impact of that to your situation, right? And so the other one that they've calculated additional variables, they've added the growing season length. So if you want to understand if your season is changing or not, relative humidity, and also temperature-based excess mortality. So, and that's why you have about 3 days, right, to play around with these portals and tools, and for you to now develop your narrative for the climate rationale. So this is one, right? But then before you jump on these portals, please find the necessary resources. Google is always your friend, right? Try as much as possible to find all the necessary resources that are up to date, through literature, to start building your overview in terms of climate risk, right? So the region that you are interested in, for example, here they're giving you an overview for the Republic of Nigeria because this is at a country level. But for us, we want to be specific for specific areas. So you'll give your overview of that specific area, right? And then you'll also look at the climate baseline. So this is the historical. So that particular approach that you would use to develop your climate rationale. So one point is literature review, and as I mentioned earlier, right. So if you look at this report, right. So what they've done is they've used the legacy coupled model intercomparison project data, which is CMAP 5, right? So you can use this document as a guidance, but then reference to the current data, which is CMAP 6. Okay. So when you report back on Friday, I hope that you'll have used the correct scenarios to develop your climate rationales. And then in between from today up to before Friday, if you have any questions, queries, you can forward them to Isaac, and then I'll be able to assist. So this is now the climate change knowledge portal. So as I had highlighted earlier, so we are trying to improve the one that we're developing under the adaptation atlas. So I'll also share with you, it's still under development. So I forgot to share. So I'll share. That's what you want to use for the adaptation atlas, and then this is what you want to use for your spatial maps, the climate change knowledge portal, right? And so the other thing that I wanted to highlight, which I forgot, yes. So if you look at the information that is provided here, right? So it gives you the general information, but critical is this part here, right? So the data foundation of the IPCC assessment report 6. So data is presented at 0.5, 0.5, about 25 kilometer by 25 kilometer grid resolution. Okay. So in perspective, that covers a bit of a bigger area, right? So for example, if you have smaller units within your area of interest, then you can imagine that one grid is giving you that information for, like 2 different regions, except for one grid giving you that information. So with 25 by 25, then it averages a lot of information that would have been captured. For example, if we are using a higher resolution data, let's say 5 by 5 grid resolution. I think I wanted to, let me see on the documentation. Okay. I just want to, I want to show you how the adaptation atlas data is at what spatial resolution. But essentially, because I've been part of the team that has developed this pipeline, so what we've done for the CMAP6 data is we've downscaled that to a 5 by 5 grid resolution, so 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer. So spatially, the data that